Shahrukh, Iqbal, Mirza, and Samuel Ferguson doing O-My-Phish, which I'm very excited about. You there, guys?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
What's going on? Are we good to go? Can we run it?
You're good to go.
Green light, weapons free.
All right.
We're going to shut our mouths now, and you guys get on with it. Carry on.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Hi, chat. Hi, everyone. We're here talking about O-My-Phish. My name's Sam. Right below me on my screen, at least, is Shaw. Say hi, Shaw.
Hey.
Cool. So yeah, we're talking about leveraging Office 365 and Azure for phishing. Before we get started, a message from our resident disclaimer man, Shaw.
So, well, a little disclaimer here. The opinions expressed in this presentation and in any corresponding comments are the personal opinions of the original authors and not those of CVS Health and Digital Labs. That's where we work.
Yeah, we're not trying to get fired, guys. So, we're just gonna put that out there. Anyway, so quick introduction about ourselves. You're probably wondering who these two fools are on your screen talking about some phishing stuff. My name's Sam Ferguson. I work for CVS Health in the IT Leadership Development Program. I'm an IT Leadership Development professional. It's a kind of a entry career rotational program. Pretty cool stuff where I get specialized in cybersecurity, get to work with a bunch of different teams, learn a bunch of cool stuff. But as you might be able to tell from this presentation, I am very interested in red team and purple team. So I kind of like to specialize in that particular area. Outside of my more professional experience, I'm a volunteer mod over at Digital Overdose, who happens to be one of our sponsors for this event. So thanks to Theo for sponsoring this, really appreciate it. And that's a little bit about me. So I'll hand it over to Shah, who will introduce himself and kind of get us kicked off.
So, my name's Shahrukh, but you can all call me Shah, and I'm a hacker red teamer. I'm one of the staff members at the Republic of Hackers. I'm a hacking is not a crime advocate and an addictive CTF player. So let's start with our presentation. Now, since everyone know who we are and what we do, so let's start with the presentation itself and talk about catching fish. So what is phishing? Phishing is basically a social engineering attack that attackers do to exploit someone's level of trust or someone's interest in something. And for us red teamers, we carry out phishing activities as a part of our adversarial emulation engagements. Well, phishing can be used to steal sensitive data or install malicious tools on a victim's computer. Basically, phishing has two main objectives. First being credential harvesting, where you phish the victim for their creds to their emails, their social media, their bank accounts, etc. And the other being payload delivery, where you deliver your own payload to get a callback on your C2 or in the form of a reversal or whatever your desired actions are. So phishing has been a real challenge lately with the email gateways becoming more and more efficient and old school phishing techniques work no more, right? So the basic challenges arising in phishing, in our opinion, are listed here like email security gateways becoming efficient day by day and flagging our attachments or links malicious and warning the emails of suspicious activity, email getting flagged as a spam and not landing in the victim's inbox and rather going to the victim's junk or spam folder. And thirdly, user awareness. People these days are becoming more and more cyber resilient and they take caution when clicking on unknown links or download malicious attachments in the email. So today our talk will be based around bypassing these challenges. And to start off, I'd like to hand over the mic here to Sam and please start.
Cool. All right. Whoops. Double click there. So, as Shah pointed, kind of got us started with general phishing. We're going to talk more about how Office 365, or as it's known now, Microsoft 365. I still call it a 365, so I'll probably refer to it as that. How we can utilize that to leverage things like kind of generic phishing infrastructure, or maybe some potential bypasses that might get around some security controls. And the first thing I want to start off with is phishing SaaS, or software as a service, because building a proper, quote unquote, proper infrastructure isn't always necessary. Maybe you have, a very short-term engagement where the time investment that needs to go into setting up a proper phishing infrastructure is much higher than you'd like to. Maybe you have a particular one-off test that you want to try. You just saw something on Twitter like, man, I really want to test this out, see if it'll work against our organization. Maybe also your organization, doesn't really have the resources to, build up its own infrastructure properly. And you need to look for some more cost-effective solutions to that. And Microsoft, luckily, actually is pretty helpful for us potential phishers because we've got a couple options that we can use here. And the two that I'm going to really be focusing on in this talk is, of course, Outlook and Microsoft 365 for small business. So let's get started with something I'm sure we're all very familiar with, and that is Microsoft Outlook. It is, of course, the free online email platform that you know and love. Now, why are we specifically looking at Outlook? And even in general, why might we be looking at Microsoft? Well, Outlook itself is a Microsoft product, so it is compatible with Exchange. And the Exchange platform is something that is widely used throughout many organizations. Lots of organizations leverage, things like Active Directory and any sort of Microsoft tool because they just integrate so easily. It's very simple to use from that perspective. So there's a high chance that an organization that you're going to target, if it's kind of Windows centric, it's going to have Exchange on those endpoints. So because we're using Outlook, we've got some platform specific phishing opportunities that we can take advantage of. Now, I will outline some of the downsides that we have at Outlook before we get into kind of the details of it. Some of the downsides that I've seen personally from testing it is you can get blocked by Microsoft for spam. So, just be aware of, how many emails and stuff you're sending out. Don't send too many at a high rate. You might get caught really easily. So again, for the target audience that we're looking at, those smaller tests where maybe you aren't firing off as many emails, this should probably work. And of course, the other thing is trained users will likely spot out questionable details about Outlook itself, specifically with the email being at outlook.com. So let's jump into some of the specific techniques we can utilize. And first, I want to look at the social engineering text that you can kind of utilize here. And I've got some example images you can take a look at. So the first thing, of course, is your name and email address, which we can see over here. So Microsoft doesn't really filter too much. The only thing I will mention is it does filter the word security. So, which is actually really funny because I forgot to mention this. I go by a find security. So if you try to make like a find security at outlook.com, don't work. Security is blocked out. But, I can make something like this. We have the Acme help desk, acme-helpdesk at outlook.com. So we're able to, create names that can either simulate legitimate individuals or maybe some organizations or units within a business that would be trusted, like a help desk, for example. And we can make it look relatively believable when it's coming through. And again, if it's coming through on a Microsoft product, they're going to see things looking similar to this. So users will probably be inclined to trust it. And of course, the signature setting in Outlook. I mean, these things aren't necessarily unique, but it's worth mentioning because, of course, these are things you can add to your phishing engagements that are going to make them look more and more legitimate. For a signature, especially if you're aware of how the company, formats its email signatures and what those typically look like, you can probably make an email signature that looks very similar, very convincing. Or if you make up your own kind of company that you want to pretend that you're acting as, you can create a very legitimate looking signature. And that just kind of adds to the perceived authenticity of the email. So Outlook really only covers some of the basics, and that makes sense for the type of service that it is. It's pretty free. You've got things like, the outlook.com URL. That's probably going to get caught by a normal user as, this seems kind of weird when they have their own domain name. So there's kind of issues with things along those lines. But when we get into something like Microsoft 365 for small business, we get some additional opportunities that come to us. So if you're not familiar what MS 365 for small business is, it's a SaaS solution that is targeted towards small business users. And this is a SaaS solution that actually, for our purposes, comes with a free 1-month trial, which basically means, oh boy, we get a free month of phishing. This is great. So you can set it up, everything. You do have to put a credit card in and all that. You gotta have payments methods set up. But regardless, you can get at least a month set up. And if you wanted to transfer this into maybe a full-time phishing solution or a more long-term phishing solution, you can get licenses for anywhere from $5 to $20 per user per month. And the cool thing about this is it's got access to the Office suite of tools and a bunch of other Microsoft tools, which I'm going to highlight in just a minute. And this really expands on what we're capable of doing within this phishing, as far as phishing opportunities go for Microsoft. So let's start taking a look at first some of the social engineering techniques that we can utilize. Obviously, all the techniques from Outlook still apply. Email, and the names are still important. Domain names. This can be really interesting. So what Microsoft does is they give you a star.onmicrosoft.com email address. And what you can do is that asterisk area, you can put in pretty much any name that you want. So you can see here that I've got acme.onmicrosoft.com. Now, for the observant people of you, you'll probably notice that I just lied because this is not acme.onmicrosoft.com. It's acrme.onmicrosoft.com. So we're doing a little bit of domain spoofing, kind of acting like, we are, or typo squatting, I guess might be a better way of putting it. So these are techniques that you can utilize if you can't get a legitimate domain. So say acme.allmicrosoft.com was taken, kind of modify it, change it a little bit, put Acme with maybe 2 E's or something else that maybe will users, if they're just quickly glancing over the email address, it'll seem legitimate. Another thing you can do in small business is obviously you can have multiple users. As you can see here, I've got multiple users in this account. And if you're building a more full-fledged phishing scenario, you can maybe make it where, someone reaches out to the client and then says, hey, can you reach out to this other person? They're my superior with your response. And that kind of adds to a bit of authenticity of, oh, this is an actual company with actual sort of hierarchy and coworkers and things like that. So you can leverage that opportunity as well. And the other thing that you can leverage is customized SharePoint sites. So on this system, you'll have access to SharePoint, and you can make these SharePoint sites public. So if you wanted to make, some sort of website, that SharePoint site that made it look like, oh, this was just a site to be shared between, this company, your fake company, and then the target company because they have some sort of partnership or something like that, you could actually do that. And it's a really cool opportunity, and SharePoint will actually come in just a little bit later as first of our additional techniques. So these are kind of the generic social engineering techniques, but Shaw brought up something that I want to talk a little bit about, and that is, of course, the secure email gateways, or SEGs. And these today are the frontline defense against malicious messages. They provide detections on both URLs and attachments, and even URLs that download or redirect to a download can be inspected. So, if you're putting anything directly into the email attachments that's malicious, or a link that directly downloads something, there's almost 100% certainty that you're going to get caught unless it is something that is extremely customized and avoiding any sort of signature detection that these SEGs might be looking at. Some examples you might know: ForcePoint, Proofpoint, Mimecast, FireIMX, or O365 Defender Safe Links. So how can we get around these using the Microsoft suite of tools that we have at our disposal? So the first link is a Outlook bypass for OneDrive. So a legitimate URL for a file location that can be shared via OneDrive, which puts it to the OneDrive URL, which, if I remember correctly, I think is onedrv.com. Now, obviously, here we have an example of Microsoft's O365 safe links. Rewriting it down here, you can see that nam12.safelinks. It can be rewritten, but again, it's going to be a legitimate domain and may add to some authenticity where the SEG may be like, oh, this is from OneDrive. This is okay. And again, this content also appears similar to any standard attachment that would show on an email, especially in Microsoft products. They look almost identical to just a normal attachment. So that's kind of cool as far as Outlook goes. But what about MS365? And that's where we kind of get to add in SharePoint. So in SharePoint, you get a shareable link that you can embed in an email, and you can make this shareable to anyone at all, anyone that you want to share it with, which is super awesome. So of course, you also get a legitimate domain with being SharePoint. The SharePoint domain is awesome. Oh, I should have probably deleted that out there. That's a little mistake. Proofread your PowerPoints, boys and girls. And of course, you get a nice little icon over here. Now, this one doesn't show up because it was rewritten by the SEG. But if the SEG doesn't rewrite it, you'll get a little icon that will show, a little Word document or a little PowerPoint document, which is super nice, and that really helps. Now, these are relatively trivial bypasses, and a more properly configured SEG can probably pick up on these things pretty easily. But there is a more generic bypass, which we're also going to leverage another Microsoft product, Azure, to take advantage of. So as we mentioned before, the SEGs tend to inspect files and even downloaded files from links and redirects. But SEGs may not be able to get past any form of user interaction. So if something must be clicked, if it's not an automatic redirection, some SEGs just go and look, say, oh, this is where I'm stopping at. This page looks fine. Send it forward, and it gets sent. So things like CAPTCHAs or an OTP entry or something along those lines can actually stop SEGs from checking for any additional malicious files. And this provides us with a path to bypass. So here's an example using something called Google Firebase. Yes, I know this is Microsoft topic, but we're using Google here. Just let me have this one, okay, guys? So Google Firebase is a really easy way to deploy a CAPTCHA. It's got a pretty easily integrated process. You can Google it. It's pretty straightforward. And Azure Blob Storage is an opportunity to serve direct downloads from a legitimate URL. Again, we're using from that Azure-based URL, and a lot of proxies and SCGs that are looking at a URL probably are going to find that legitimate because there's probably going to be other legit files that users are accessing from links of that nature. So the steps to execute this are pretty straightforward, actually. You make a Firebase app, generate the reCAPTCHA keys for your app. You add the keys and logic to Firebase that's needed, pretty straightforward process. And then you create an Azure Blob Storage with a public read access. Once you've done that, you'll obviously upload your malicious file in there so that people can download it. And then you'll add a redirect to the blob storage, specifically that malicious file that you want to download into the URL redirect. So when a user goes in and gets their email, well, the SCG will look at it, see the CAPTCHA, it can't interact with it anymore. It's going, all right, this looks good to me. Nothing weird going on here. The user will get it, open the link, and see the CAPTCHA. They'll click through the CAPTCHA, they'll go to the regular site, and they'll automatically download that malicious file. So from there, we get profit because now we have beacons for days, which is awesome. So that's kind of some of the more advanced side of things and kind of moving away from O365, MS365, and more on the Azure side. But that's not all you can do with Azure because Shaw's got a really cool bypass that we can utilize in the Azure product as well. So I'm going to hand it over to my co-presenter, Shaw.
Thanks, Sam. So in this bypass, we're using Azure Information Protection to bypass secure email gateways. So what Azure Information Protection basically is, previously it was called Rights Management Services, and for an on-prem Active Directory, it's called Active Directory Rights Management Service. This basically is a unified labeling technique for classification and protection of organizational data. It uses Microsoft Rights Management Services to encrypt emails and attachments. You can restrict the emails and attachments to specific targets. You can not only send your emails and attachments to people inside your organization, but outside your organization. Set an expiry time for emails and attachments so that your attachment that you're sending, the malicious attachment, is no longer available after a certain period of time. You can track the attachments, like when the victim saw the email, when he clicked on the attachment, when he opened the attachment, how many users clicked on the links or the attachment itself. And another thing that you can do is you can revoke the access at any time that you need. And it's easy setup. If you already use Azure, you just log into your Microsoft 365 admin center. From there you go to information rights management, and there you can create your labels. And yeah, that's it. So why should we use AIP to bypass email security gateways? Because let's be honest, payload delivery is a pain in the butt. But we have Azure Information Protection with us, ready to serve our payload to our victims. So some advantages of using AIP to bypass SEGs. As I already mentioned, you can track your sent emails, see when email was viewed, opened, your emails are encrypted, your payloads are encrypted. Even if you upload your mail doc to VirusTotal, it wouldn't be able to identify it as a malicious document because the payload, the mail doc is encrypted, and it cannot read the encrypted format. You have access revocation, like you want to revoke the access. You saw in the dashboard that your victim has clicked on the link, it has they have downloaded the attachment, and you do not want it to redistribute. So you can, you know, you can even set a do not forward uh, feature in Outlook when you're using AIP, so that the emails are not forwarded. And when you get a callback from your malicious document, you can use the access revocation, so the user will have his access revoked. And it not only supports MS Office file formats, it supports a variety of file formats. Like for example, it supports PDFs, it supports JPEGs, it supports text files. And once you encrypt the file using AIP, a little p gets added in the extension of the file name. So how does this work? Basically, AIP works when you add encryption to your files. Uh, it for when you and when you send the malicious document to the victim, it if it's using Azure AD, it will go to Azure, look for the credentials. And since Azure is a single sign-on service, you won't have to sign in or enter your credentials, but it will go to Azure, look for credentials, find that the credentials match for the email that I as an attacker have specified for the attachment meant to be. And if the credentials match the email address, then it'll give you the access to give you the access to my malicious document, and then the document will be downloaded. And another thing, that if you don't have a Microsoft Azure Office 365 account, either it will ask you to create an O365 account on Azure, or if you can even send the encrypted files on a Gmail or a Hotmail service. And this for this, it will generate a special link because of the collaboration between Microsoft and other email clients. The only limitation that I found when using AIP was uh, uh, when you're using AIP to encrypt files other than MS Office files. An AIP GUI client is required to view those encrypted files. So this is an example of a recent engagement that I did. I used AIP for my payload delivery. I created sensitivity labels in my MS Admin Center and prepared a maldoc with the macros enabled, and applied the confidential label to protect it. The payload was totally encrypted. You can alternatively encrypt your maldoc using the AIP GUI client as well. And you can set custom permissions, like when you want the access to be revoked, when you who you want to specifically target your who you want to specifically set your target as. And yeah, I did both of them. I sent out an encrypted email, I sent out an encrypted payload. It bypassed all the SEGs, and it landed in the victim's inbox. I got a call back, and this is it from my side. Happy phishing, guys.
Awesome. Well, that's going to bring us to the close of our presentation. You can see our LinkedIn and Twitters on there. Feel free to connect with us on either of those platforms. I probably speak for both when I say we love talking security, and especially red teaming. So if you want to connect, talk about that, we're happy to talk to anyone who's interested. But yeah, I think that's going to end it for us. Beer farmers, welcome back? Question mark.
Okay.
Thanks,
much,
man.
guys.
And I would call this talk the most disconcerting thing I've seen in a while. Like, massive congratulations on figuring this stuff out, and hopefully making the world a better place.
Agreed. And it should scare InfoSec teams globally, because the high adoption rates, and I consider myself in that group of Microsoft 365, it's it's mushrooming right globally.
Yeah,
because
and there's a false sense of security, is what we just learned at BeerCon3.
and I think there is, and I think a lot of people that deploy 365 maybe assume that it comes out of the box.
Well, that's cloud in general. They
Yeah.
just have this assumption it's someone else's thing, so therefore it's going to be someone else's responsibility.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah, and I work
terrible.
real. Yeah, you're right. I work really closely with, and my team works really closely with our 365 integration team, and there is a lot of work to do to get to even a small level of security assurance inside that ecosystem. So, yeah, it's fantastically interesting. So I think we'll wrap with that one.
Yeah.
Shah, thank you very much. Sam, you're sticking around.
Thank you, folks.
But before we proceed with your closing talk, we're just going to have a little bit of a housekeeping chat. So thanks, guys. Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thanks, guys.